Israeli ambassador to the UK, who is with me now, Tzipi Hotovely. You're very welcome.
Hello,
in the studio here at TalkTV. Just before we talk about the hostages, the last time we discussed, we had this a discussion. It was the day after the 7th, I think it was the 8th of October, and you were in Israel. I know you've members of your family who are reservists, like many Israelis. They're attached, have done military service and remain reservists. What's happening with your own family? Are they safe, or how are they dealing with what's going on at the moment?
To be honest with you, at the moment, everyone in Israel is under a fire because, as you know, over 100,000 Israelis been evacuated from their homes. And we are in a moment in preparing ourselves to understand this is a long war, a war that Hamas started with the most brutal attack on civilization. Seriously, this is not just about the Israeli people. My message to everyone who's watching that and is worried whether it can happen in Europe, the answer is yes, if you don't fight this ideology. Because Hamas doesn't stand for political solutions. He just wants to make sure no Jew will exist. And this is according to his charter, to his ideological manifesto.
They're not interested in negotiation because a lot of people are calling on you to negotiate with them. But when they say we want to wipe your country off the face of the map and we want to kill every Jew, that's not exactly a negotiating position. That is just hatred, pure and simple.
The only thing you can negotiate with Hamas is the color of the flowers on your grave. Basically, they want to kill you. They want to make sure that whatever, no matter what borders, the Jewish state won't exist. And this is what stands behind these horrible lines of between the river to the sea, because Israel is in between the river to the sea. And this is why I think the people in Israel at the moment are so united in this war, because they understand that nothing can be more justified than a Western country, a democratic country that cares about human rights, cares about humanity, that is fighting her justified war against this barbarism, this acts of violation of any human rights law that you can imagine.
But you must be concerned not only about the innocent civilians in your own country of Israel, but also about the Gazans who are being caught up in this. Is the Israeli government doing all it can to protect their lives?
I can guarantee you, because this is part of our priorities. When we fight a terror organization, we know they're embedded in schools, in hospitals. They use their own population as human shields, as you know. And this is our duty, because we live on a different standard of morality. And we know that as a country, we're fighting this war against this horrible terror organization, but we want to make sure we minimize the casualties. And I am calling to everyone that is listening, move to the south area of Gaza, because this is the strikes and all those military actions at the moment are taking place in the north area of Gaza. And we would like to make sure that those casualties will be terrorists involved, not civilians.
We know that on the 7th of October, that absolutely horrendous terrorist attack by Hamas, that many people were taken as hostages. We think somewhere in the region of about 240 people. On the hostages, there has been some criticism of your Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for not meeting families, and in fact President Biden apparently met families of the hostages previously. He is in a difficult political situation. I know that there are many in Israel who are united behind him, but there are some who criticise him, and I wonder whether you think that he has done enough for the hostages so far.
So I know from everything I heard in the last 48 hours that all leadership in Israel, as you know, our work cabinet is based on opposition and coalition, so it's not just one side of the country. It's actually it reflects a big majority of Israelis. They both know that Hamas won't deliver, unfortunately, because the type of cruelty of this terror organization won't release any information unless we'll put military pressure. And part of what Israel is doing is, first of all, to dismantle Hamas capabilities, so the horrible sites of the 7th of October will never be repeated again. And the second thing is,
there are many civilian casualties in Gaza, and I know you want to avoid them, but it is nonetheless the case. And I mean, look, we have to be sceptical about we hear this all the time. The Gazan Health Ministry says that 7,000 people, 7,700 people have died. That is Hamas, and that might be propaganda. We need to question all those statistics, but nonetheless it is clear that many civilians in Gaza have died. I know you're trying to avoid that, but they have died, and that is something that everyone looking on this is concerned about.
So first of all, I appreciate the fact that you're actually saying, as a journalist, that you you can't believe Hamas. This is something that every journalist should have in his mind when he's reporting on what's going on in Gaza, because, as you know, just to take one case as a case study, some of those casualties are caused by their own military actions. 33% of the rockets in former military activities were actually falling in the Gaza Strip and killing their own population. So, unfortunately, because we're dealing with a terror organization that doesn't care about the people in Gaza, I need to repeat that, they don't care about the people. They don't care about supplying them any type of supplies, not food, not water. They put all...
And this is historic as well, isn't it? Because the aid that was given to Gaza was not spent on hospitals, schools, water supply, electricity supply, infrastructure. It was spent on weapons.
It was spent on underground terror city, was built by Hamas. Over $100 million were spent on building this 300 kilometers. Gaza Strip is very small. It's 40 kilometers, this area. But they built 300 kilometers of this underground terror city that is doing just one thing, launching rockets on Israel, making sure they will have enough military supplies to kill innocent Israelis.
So with that in mind, Madam Ambassador, we're in a situation where Israel is bombarding Gaza. I want to talk about the UK in a second and the threat here as well, but Israel is bombarding Gaza. This heave, this battle against Hamas, and actually rebuilding Gaza, if we get to the other side of this, which I hope we do soon, is Israel ready for that? Is Israel committed to rebuilding Gaza? I mean, what would Gaza look like when this is over, do you think, apart from rubble?
I love comparing it to, we all wearing this in November just to remember
your
the
poppy.
people.
Yeah.
The reason I'm wearing it is because we need to remind ourselves that Britain played a major role in defeating the most evil regime in the world, the Nazi regime. And in order to make a new Marshall Plan for Europe, you need first of all to make sure your enemy is defeated. And your enemy at the moment is Hamas terrorists that were using Nazi systematically killing of Jews in order to make sure that all those Jews in southern area of Israel won't exist, and they unfortunately they managed to kill brutally over 400 Israelis, and this is something we need to remember. First, you need to make sure Hamas threat is dismantled, and then you need to work on a Marshall Plan for the Gaza Strip. But you cannot do a future plan to Gaza without making sure Hamas is not in control. And you heard your foreign secretary. He was saying clearly that the people of Gaza will be in much better place when Hamas won't be the control of the Gaza Strip.
You mentioned the Foreign Secretary there, James Cleverly, and both he and the Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, are on a tour of various bits of the region. I know James Cleverly has been to Israel, and we were actually in touch with the Foreign Office earlier today, and they're not releasing information for all understandable reasons in terms of the identity of British hostages in Gaza. But I know there are people like Ada Sagi, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, who is an Israeli hostage whose son is British. There are definite British links, and I know there are British people who've been killed in Gaza and are at risk in Gaza as well as in Israel, of course, as well. I wonder, from your perspective, you being Israel's chief representative in the UK, what sort of pressure are you both getting from the UK government and also in reverse putting on them to get these British hostages back?
I know that the UK government is very much committed to make sure that every international pressure can be made is to release all the hostages, because, as I said again, all these people are innocent people that they need to be back home. So I know the British government is committed. The Prime Minister met some of the hostages' families, of course, and he said he's committed to do all he can. You have long historic ties with the Gulf countries, yes, and with many people in the Arab world. So I know that the British government is committed and will try its best to be helpful.
You mentioned a phrase earlier on which is deeply offensive to many people. It's offensive to me, it's offensive to you as well, I would imagine, from the river to the sea. And this is when people hold placards and something saying Free Palestine, it's related to that. And the phrase from the river to the sea essentially means that Palestine should be free and that
free from Jews,
free from Jews, and Israel should not exist.
Exactly.
So that is essentially a phrase that means that Israel should not exist and that Jewish people should be should be eradicated, essentially. Now we have a Labour MP, Andy MacDonald, who is a Corbynista MP who has used that phrase. He has been backed up by two others who haven't used the phrase. One of them being John McDonnell, the former Shadow Chancellor, who is of course a key ally of Jeremy Corbyn. I'm sure you don't want to involve yourself in British party politics, but what on earth does that say to you as Israel's ambassador to the UK when you have British parliamentarians using that phrase?
I think many people just don't understand what it means, as simple as that. So people need to understand the 7th of October was a shocking and horrifying example of how the world looks when from the river to the sea will be applied from, just a chanting in the streets to practically trying to get to this reality. And this is why it's so horrifying. And the second thing, I think we're all terrified from what we hear in the streets of London.
Yeah, and well, we've seen those protests. We've seen an image which I saw over the weekend. Thankfully, we're absolutely not going to broadcast it on this network, but it was a Palestinian flag that people were sort of lifting and kind of waving, but it was sort of together, almost like a bed sheet. And it had mocked up dead Israeli babies on it with blood and swaddle and all the rest, swaddling clothes and all the rest of it. I mean, that to me was just absolutely horrific. There are people who will have gone on that march here, totally have every right to do so. There will be free speech and free protest in this country, but there are undoubtedly people on the streets of this country who want Israel to be eradicated and want Jews to die. What is your reaction to that?
I think that this is just one part. I think the very, very terrifying statements were about jihad, about from London to Gaza intifada. I hope people understand what that means. The brutality and the killing we've seen were under this type of radical ideology of jihad. So it means that they have the duty to kill innocent people, not just, it happened. No,
we have
part of their duty. So
sorry to interrupt you, but we have the Metropolitan Police as well saying that jihad can mean various things. You must have been horrified by that.
I think, again, I'm not getting here a philosophy of Islam, because we're not speaking about Muslim people. We're speaking about people that are taking a very specific thing that was interpreted in Israel on the 7th of October as killing innocent Jews. And this is why the context is terrifying. This is the problem. The fact those demonstrations are not coming from vacuum. They're coming from the reality that Israel, the 7th of October, was attacked, and they're coming now to protest with their flag. So Hamas is a recognized terror organization, and actually I call for everyone that supports even the Palestinian cause to support Israel with its legitimacy, not just to protect its own people, but to protect the whole region from this barbarism, because this barbarism is not doing any good to those young children in Gaza that get those camps of terror since they are 4 years old. This doesn't make sense. We need to fight this type of ideology. Again, Britain fought the Nazi regime because they understood that part of being a civilized world, you need to fight barbarism, and that was barbarism, the Second World War, and we've seen the consequences on the Jewish people, but beyond. So I think everyone needs to support Israel.
I want to ask you just finally, in regard to the Labour Party here in the UK is tearing itself apart. There are about 100 parliamentarians, mayors, councillors, other people who are saying that there should be a ceasefire. Now, the Prime Minister's position and Keir Starmer's position is that there should be humanitarian pauses to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. What would you say? I'm sure you don't want to involve yourself in party political politics in the UK. I wouldn't ask you to do so. But what is your message to those people who say a ceasefire would be an answer?
My message is very simple. I will quote Hillary Clinton that said clearly, ceasefire will only be a gift to the war machine of Hamas, to make sure that they will have their war machine ready to keep on doing those horrible things they've been doing since the 7th of October. So this is clear from American leadership, from the UK leadership, by the way, and you have it from the British Prime Minister saying clearly they're not supporting ceasefire. Humanitarian pauses is a different thing. And everyone that cares about this campaign to succeed, fighting this terror organization, needs to understand you cannot do that by creating ceasefire that are only giving Hamas the time to bring back his forces, and the fact that Israel needs time to finish this very, very complicated work that is involved with also an underground terror city. This is part of the reason why ceasefire is unacceptable, and we will work relentlessly in order to make sure that the goals will be accomplished.
Just briefly, we haven't mentioned Iran in all of this. What is the international pressure that you think should be on Iran at this, and how convinced Minister Yu that they are funding and propping up and behind this, because Hamas presumably couldn't have done it all itself?
We know that 90% of Hamas budget coming from Iran, so it's as simple as that. And Hezbollah is sponsored by Iran, and they're both proxies of Tehran and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So this ideology is fueling those two terror organizations, and I think the world knows what should be done, and I think we discussed that many times. But now this is our moment to make sure that Israel's children will be safe, that innocent people will never be hostage by Hamas, kept hostage by Hamas, and we need to release these 239 people.